Good afternoon. We'll roll call in 30 seconds. Stand by, please. Alrighty. Good afternoon and welcome to the June 25th Special Council meeting. Recognize that we're having today's meeting on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional territory of the Cree, the Dene, the Saulteaux, the Nakota Sioux, and the Blackfoot peoples, as well as one of the great homelands of the Métis Nation. I'll need a motion to approve the agenda in a moment, but first let me take attendance, starting with Councillor Henderson.
I'm here.
Councillor Knack.
Good afternoon.
Councillor McKean.
Yep, present.
Councillor Nickel.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Paquette.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Walters.
Hey everybody, good afternoon.
Councillor Banga.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Cartmel.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Katarina.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Zadek.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Essinger.
Good afternoon.
And Councillor Hamilton.
Good afternoon.
That is full deck. Deuces are wild. Need a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Essinger.
I'm happy to move the special city council meeting agenda today.
Second.
Councillor Henderson got that by a whisker. Please vote to adopt the agenda. Again, it is for the sole purpose
Yes, Mr. Clerk.
of considering bylaw 19783.
Thank you, Councillor Katarina. Councillor Hamilton, if we could get your vote, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. We have all the votes, Mr. Mayor.
Display the vote. And that's carried. There are no protocol items. The only item before us is 6.1, and just a process reminder, we're here because the amending bylaw 19783, the temporary mandatory face coverings bylaw amendment, did not receive consent for all three readings to occur at the council meeting on Tuesday. Therefore, council determined that a special meeting be called by resolution, and we are here now with third reading before us here today. So would someone care to move third reading of the bylaw?
I would like to, Mr. Mayor. I'd move third reading of bylaw 19783.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Nickel. Okay. It is in order to speak to it again. Did you want to introduce it or wait to close, or do you have anything to add, Councillor Zadek?
I'll introduce it for about 20 seconds. If everyone clicks on and speaks to it, I might close, but I'll be quick with a quick introduction. So I would, if I may now, I would say case counts have continued to gone down since we last spoke about this, which should give us some reassurance that we are going forward in the right direction. I also understand that the recommendation for third reading has not changed from City Administration or from Alberta Health Services, meaning they both support this motion. And so I hope my colleagues can pass third reading today so that we give the public a little bit more clarity of what will be mandatory and what will be voluntary with regard to face coverings on July 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zadek. I have Councillor McKean and Councillor Henderson in the queue next. Councillor McKean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I just want to start by saying that I offer my complete understanding and respect to all my colleagues today and their vote. I think it's time we tried to build bridges in this community and reduce the amount of divisiveness and inflammatory comments. I understand that one of my colleagues who voted in favor of lifting the mask mandate took quite a bit of grief. And I don't like to hear that, even though I was on the opposite side of the vote. And I just quickly want to explain what I think might be a difference in perspective that we get geographically, actually. So I represent a ward which has, I suspect it's the highest population density ward with Edmonton's most population dense neighborhood of Oliver. And I think, you know, the number of emails I've received with people who are really concerned about lifting the mask mandate, many of them probably live like I do, and that's elevator living, and you live cheek to jowl with other people. And so it feels a little bit more threatening, I think, versus living, which I've done for a lot of my life, most of my life, lived in a more of a suburban setting where you have the big backyard and all that stuff. So in places like Oliver, it's to live your life, it means getting the heck out of your apartment and out into some tighter spaces. So I think that's maybe why I'm getting those emails from those people, and why I will be representing them in my vote today to again say no. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor McKeon. Councillor Banga?
I thought,
Oh, you're right. The order jumped there. I've got Councillor Henderson, then Councillor Banga, then Councillor Walters. Councillor Henderson?
Bad habit. Yeah, I have also had many emails from people on both sides of the equation. One of them, though, and this is one of the reasons why my vote was, and I think this to build on what Councillor McKeon was saying, and I think you all received the letter from the Old Strath County Business Association, and it's with a result that wasn't surprising to me, that there's a lot of people that are not going to feel safe without the masks, and that we actually may have the wrong effect here. We actually may make it harder for people to go out because they will not trust that others will be wearing masks. I heard in particular from a lot of families with children under 12 who can't be vaccinated yet, who are concerned for them. And I think we are also putting the businesses in a difficult situation where a lot of businesses, for the continued protection of their staff, would like to keep masking still in place, and are really worried that if we don't have their back, it's going to be very hard to do, and we're going to put them in conflict with their customers. So, I mean, I understand completely that probably the risks of doing this are fairly minimal, but I'm not sure in terms of public confidence out there and public trust in the ability to go out safely that they are there yet. And I really worry, and I think just by holding off a little bit longer on this, we will truly give people the confidence to open up in all those other kind of ways that I think are far more vital. And if it allows people to open up, to try things, to go places they wouldn't otherwise go because they have some comfort, because others are wearing masks, I think that's a greater benefit to us, quite frankly, than actually taking a number of people who now may no longer feel comfortable going out because we're not prepared to just wait a few more weeks, and I don't think it would be long. So that's my concern right now. It's about allowing people to engage fully with confidence, and for a lot of people, taking the masks away is not going to allow them to do that, and those are the people I'm hearing from. And the same is true for our businesses. I mean, the recommendation is still to be cautious, that the recommendation is still to wear masks. And for all those people that take that recommendation, they are going to be worried about the people that don't. And it may impede their ability to do what we want them to do, which is to be able to re-engage fully in their lives. So for that reason, I think it still makes sense to hold on to this just a little bit longer, to truly understand what's going to happen, to give our public full confidence that they can fully engage and safely engage and get their lives back to normal. And I think sticking with the masks a little bit longer are going to help everybody do that. And my worry is by not doing that, we're going to actually do what Councillor McKeon referred to, which is push some people back indoors and not feeling safe going out. And I don't think that should be our intention.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Next is Councillor Benga.
Thank you. I'll just keep it short and sweet. I understand that everybody received a lot of emails, phone calls, etc., from constituents over this debate, and from both sides, mind you. And when we implemented the bylaw for the masks, we listened to the experts. Dr. Skora from our side here, and overall Dr. Hinshaw. And at that time, they said that we should have masks, and we did. And now we are still working with them, I guess, with their advice. I do not see any reason not to stick with their advice at this point in time. I know there is going to be some apprehensive behavior by a lot of folks to go out in public without the masks. But again, and I also do understand that the masks are supposed to be preventing others from you, not you from others. But the medical experts are saying that we are good to go. And apprehensive, we're not saying everybody should not have a mask on. If somebody does not feel that they're not safe without the mask, they should probably do what they believe. But I am basing my decision on the medical experts, unless they tell me that something have changed, which apparently is not the case. So my vote will again stay for not wearing the masks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benga. Councillor Walters.
Yeah, thanks. So, just think it's important to clarify here around the notion that, those supporting the recommendation are the only ones following expert advice. Councillor Knack did a pretty good job in the last go around on this to, remind everybody that Dr. Kaur did say it was in fact reasonable for us to consider a higher threshold of second dosed, fully vaccinated people, or a higher percentage of fully vaccinated people before we lift this. So I think that's also, there's expert advice in a broader sense that, we're sort of talking the difference between July 1st and maybe August 1st, give or take. So I think everybody here, for the most part, has been pretty keen on following expert advice. 12 to 13 of us followed expert advice in supporting the mask mandate initially, with only one ignoring expert advice at that time. So like Councillor McKeon said, I'll work hard to respect everybody's decision. Since the conversation earlier in the week, I'd say that the majority of communication to my office has been supporting extension of the mandate. So based on that and based on my previous vote, I will continue to vote for not ending this quite yet. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Walters. Councillor Essinger.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the comments from my colleagues, and I've received many emails or phone calls, and I'd say they're pretty well split on what we should do. I felt like I wanted to follow Dr. Sikora's advice and the difference between mandated and recommended. And I think I wanted to align it with the province. And I feel very comfortable with that. I know that the Old Strathcona Business Association has written to us about their desire to extend it. But I've received information from the Kingsway District Association and many of the businesses. The majority of them wanted to align it with the region. I wanted to align it with the province, and they felt like that was where we should go. So there is a lot of opinion on this from business, from citizens. Uh, Expert advice, I'm following Dr. Sikora's advice, but I also know some say 50%, some say 70%, some say after children are vaccinated. There's a range of desires out there. And I think we're all just trying to make the very best decisions that we can. A lot of feedback that, I don't care about children or women because I am voting to discontinue the face mandate. And that's not true. I'm looking at the best advice that I can see out there. And for me, I am going to follow my vote from before and discontinue the mask and align it with the province. And if something happens and they come back, we'll be there to put our mask back on. And I would encourage everyone to continue wearing their masks. I think I will. And that's a recommendation, not a mandate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton?
Councillor Esslinger practically took the words out of my mouth. I've listened very intently to the arguments that were made not only on Tuesday, the advice that we got from administration, how administration spoke about risk, and the feedback that we've gotten from residents in the meantime. And I found that by and large, from people within West Edmonton, it's been split. There's people who want the mandate to continue because there is, I think, a very valid fear that we're not out of the woods yet on this. And I think that there is an acknowledgement that we are seeing very low caseloads and that now might be an appropriate time to at least deactivate the bylaw. And so I'm going to stand by my decision to support administration's recommendation. But mostly what I wanted to speak to was something I think Councillor McKeon spoke to earlier, which is that since this discussion began, I've seen my colleagues on either side of this decision targeted in ways that, in ways that, frankly, racist ways, in very gendered ways. I saw one email in which a member of the public talked about following a member of council in their personal vehicle. And that is very disturbing to me, and says, that emotions are extremely high around this issue. And I think it's incumbent on us, regardless of how this vote falls, to, as Councillor McKeon said, build bridges and create a culture of reassurance in the city. I have no doubt in my mind that every single member of this council is voting in good conscience and voting based on the information that's been provided to us. And I hear in what everyone has said, the best interests of Edmontonians. The fact of the matter is, it's not a super easy decision. It's not a super easy thing to be on council and to make these kinds of decisions. But that's been the trend throughout the pandemic, and I see no change now. So I'm not changing my vote on this, but I will be supporting whatever the outcome is, because I respect the work and commitment that each member of this council brings to the to this job. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Knack?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to start with echoing some of those comments, including just what we just heard. I think it is important to yet again stress that we were actually given 2 reasonable courses of action, and members of council are going to make a choice on 2 reasonable courses of action. So I'm completely fine if I'm on the losing end of this vote, and I do not hold ill will or a grudge or question anyone who would vote to repeal this. You are following the advice that you received, just like I believe, and I will vote no on this because I still believe that the advice I heard, there was 2 different ways we could go, and I would like to exercise a slight bit more caution as we move into this next phase. That was reinforced for me, particularly, I mean, as we've talked about what's happening in other jurisdictions, and we know that Israel has just recently reintroduced their mask mandate indoors because of an increase in the Delta variant. And so I think it's not unreasonable for us to hold off for a few more weeks to see the impacts. You know, my hope was that would be that, of course, we wouldn't see that same type of impact, but in my mind, we are removing, as of July 1st, essentially all of the tools that we have been using over the last 16 months. And I felt that hanging on to just one of those many tools was not an unreasonable perspective. And in fact, I think that was suggested in our meeting. So there are 2 very valid positions today that I just wanted to stress. And I also, I think, just want to briefly touch on some of the correspondence I got to from the emails that I could pinpoint that they were in the ward. I think the emails numbered about 27 in favor of suspension of the bylaw and 25 who would like to see masks retained for a few more weeks. If you add in then some of the social media comments, again, if I can pinpoint the ones in Ward 1, it probably flips to the other side and skews about 60% in favor of retaining it until 2 weeks after everyone has 50% of their shots. So again, fairly split. I will note that of those who would like to see us move forward on July 1st, that ranged from some very thoughtful opinions based off what we had discussed ourselves on Tuesday, to some who, to some of the fun terminology. I think we, being called puppet masters and Marxists and a whole host of other fun things. But I get it's a passionate item, and I don't want to diminish that perspective. I just think that there are, again, this is a very heated topic that requires a very thoughtful consideration. So I don't want to repeat much of what I said last time, but again, I'm just going to stress this piece, which for me, when weighing the risk of removing everything on July 1st versus hanging on to one additional tool for what would be likely no more than 4 weeks based off what we heard, I feel the risk of hanging on to that tool is far lower than the risk of removing it at this point. I get there would be confusion, but I think we should remind ourselves that back in August, it was not a recommendation for us to create a mask bylaw. We were told it was a reasonable course of action, which council did take, but it was actually not a recommendation during that meeting. So likewise, we're being provided with 2 reasonable courses of action, and I think it is in my opinion that it is worth hanging on just for a few extra weeks. And if this motion, although I don't expect it will change in the vote, but if it were to, and this motion were to fail, I will again state I would put forward a motion immediately afterwards asking for the bylaw to be suspended upon after 2 weeks of 50% of eligible Edmontonians getting their vaccine. I think that would be a wise approach for us to take. And my worry is the risk of removing it and then maybe having to bring it back, like what we're seeing in other locations. That I think will be a very hard situation to navigate going forward. But respect everyone's position. We are all listening to the advice here. Nobody thinks they know more than a doctor. And I really, again, just want to close by thanking Dr. Sikora. You have provided excellent guidance throughout this entire time. I can't imagine how challenging it has been for you to constantly be referenced in many things over the year. But it has been appreciated to have your advice and guidance throughout this. So thank you very much. I won't support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, could you take the chair?
Will do.
Thanks. And you know, not to retread well-worn ground, but I think on reflection, you know, I'm glad that we've had the chance to reflect and to hear from our public on this. That's a good thing on questions as complex as this and as divided as this. And this council is split because our public is split. And I think we've heard that from many representatives, that they've heard that feedback and honor and respect that feedback. And particularly, you know, I have some sympathy for the give or take 28% of the population, which I will join tomorrow, have fully vaccinated with 14 days of efficacy from the second dose. And I would love nothing better than to be able to, you know, get back to some kind of normal and not have to think about a mask. And so I understand a lot of people who are in that position, or who have one shot and are healthy and feel very comfortable with the risk. And then others who were never going to get the vaccine in the first place and didn't think that this was all that serious to begin with. There's certainly a large cohort of folks who are quite done with all of this, and we've certainly heard from them, and we've also heard from folks, particularly lots of younger folks who have their first dose and are in the queue for sometime in the next 3-4 weeks to get their second, and then it's 2 more weeks after that before they can celebrate full vaccination, and who will certainly be free to continue to wear a mask themselves, but won't have, if this third reading passes today, the added measure of social protection and mitigation of widespread masking in indoor spaces for a few more weeks. And it is, both are valid decisions. They're risk-based decisions, and based on the same evidence, and based on the same science, and based on some different expert perspectives from different medical experts. We have advice from experts from the government of Alberta, which we've heard, and we've heard federal perspectives, and we've heard from the former Chief Medical Officer of Health for Alberta as well on behalf of the zone doctors. And there's legitimate risk-based disagreement there, which is why I think this has been overall a good debate, save the personal attacks. But just to go to the data, I mean, we've been talking a lot about celebrating 71% vaccination, single-dose vaccination. That is of the eligible population. The actual number is 60.6%. Because there are a certain number of people, because of age, who are not eligible yet. That will change. And there are a certain number of people who can't get the vaccine because of underlying health conditions at this stage. And then, of course, there are the folks who will choose not to. And so 2 in 5 people are walking around with either no protection or with some immunity, perhaps if they had a case of COVID and have some latent immunity from a previous case. Their only other mitigation from each other at this stage might be masking, and at this stage it looks like that will be voluntary masking. Everybody in an indoor space being expected to do that provides some buffer until the 33% of people who are waiting to get their second dose or waiting to get to 14 days get to that in the next few weeks. So my interpretation of the goal of getting to 70% herd immunity through a combination of natural immunity from those who've had the infection and widespread double dose full immunization is that we're very, very close to that, but we are not there yet. And so on a balance of probabilities and a precautionary basis, my view remains that masking for a few more weeks would help the 40% of Albertans, give or take, as they present in Edmonton, who either can't get vaccinated or who won't get vaccinated, help keep them safe, and also support the 32% of folks who are still waiting for that full dose of immunity. So I think it's prudent either way, and of course, I'll abide by the decision of council. So I will take the chair back
All yours.
and go to Councillor Cartmel.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments of others. I will also say just very quickly that reaction in my office has been roughly evenly split. You know, I've said that this decision is best made by the province. And I think that people have perhaps characterized that as a political view or a political contribution or a political position. The province has a Ministry of Health, and within that Ministry of Health, they have a bureaucracy that has at its fingertips all kinds of things that we don't. They don't just have the superficial data, the number of cases, perhaps the R value, the number of vaccines. They have modeling data. They see the patterns of what is happening in the province. They have the ability to analyze that data and determine risk. We're not privy to that. They have access to those who operate healthcare facilities, who are seeing things on from a front-facing basis. We don't have that feedback in our bureaucracy. They have the ability to speak to healthcare facilities in terms of operators and what they're seeing. We don't have that access to that data. We have access to Dr. Sikora for 90 minutes in a council meeting. And he has told us that ending this bylaw today is a reasonable course of action. I asked specifically in our last meeting about risk. And I asked if delaying this decision would markedly decrease the risk to children, specifically, those that don't have a vaccine yet. And the answer was no, not markedly. Are there micro situations where individuals might still be at risk? Yes, there will be. That's part of life. It's not just COVID that presents those risks. It's not just COVID that presents situations where people have to adjust to the conditions around them and live their lives accordingly. That's part of living in a society, and particularly an urban society. The province is better able to make this decision. When we first started talking about masks, it was back in July, and it was coming out of a discussion where city administration had done surveying of people that were still going on our transit system, still entering our facilities. And those surveys said that people were more comfortable if we had a mask bylaw. And this was being undertaken in the absence of any provincial widespread reaction. It was a comfort thing. It was a business thing. I believe the comment was made that if masks means that we don't have to shut down businesses again potentially in another renewed state of local emergency, that was a good thing. There was a health component, to be sure. But now this has been conflated, this has been transferred. We're being asked to essentially be the seat of second thought and second guessing. We're effectively being asked to be the appeal court or the Senate that second guesses the decisions of the government that has the responsibility for health, the government that has a health ministry, the government that has the ministry that contains all of the things that I just mentioned. We should not be in a position of acting like a Senate or acting like a court of appeal. It is time to transfer this decision, whether we support it or not, whether we believe what is being offered or not, whether we trust in the politicians or not, to transfer this back to the seat of government that should properly be judging and governing on these matters. Some are going to characterize this as yet another yo-yo reaction, that we're going to have to put restrictions in place again, that we should just wait for one more variant to clear the hurdle. Welcome to our new world, I would say. Once the next variant crests and we're beyond it, there will be another variant on the horizon. Once this virus is behind us, there will be another virus on the horizon. We're entering into a different, more connected world where this is going to continue to happen. And our society is going to move to one that ebbs and flows with those occurrences, that is going to have to react in the moment, where we're going to have limited localized restrictions for a time and then a reopening for a time. I don't see that that is going to change in the next several years, never mind in the next several weeks. So this idea that we can get to a point where the risk is eliminated and we can get back to normal, I think we need to check that. And finally, in my final moments, in terms of modeling behavior and getting along with each other and supporting each other, I think we can make that one step further. In this house, when you walk in the door, you wash your hands, you make sure you don't touch your face, you wear a mask in public places. And I think if we model that behavior, then despite any bylaw, we'll be modeling the behavior that we want to see in others. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to take the emotion down a touch here. This has been a very emotional issue, and folks have really gone one way and the other. I've heard reports of my own life being threatened and my family being threatened based on messaging that went out, frankly, from people on this council. It's ridiculous. It's irresponsible. And it's not okay. We don't have a pandemic where people are dying from wearing masks. We have a pandemic where people are dying from COVID. And agreed, we need to listen to the experts. The problem is the experts have told us what's reasonable. They haven't told us what's optimal. We have a province that has made a decision, which I think is, that's their decision. And they gave us the power to make a decision as well last year, even though we asked them not to, but they did. And then, in the course of the pandemic, they did verifiably worse than every other province in making decisions to protect citizens from the impacts of COVID-19. So, there's a little bit of critical thinking that has to go on here too. I think that it was very important to take this pause. We were asked to push through a bylaw on a major public issue without any public input. And that frankly just wasn't fair to the public. And now they have had that opportunity. And the vote today will make no difference on the timeline that was there anyway. So to turn this into something it isn't was frankly irresponsible. And in fact, there were people in media who did the same thing as well. There are effects that come from people's choices on how they choose to communicate. And we need to be cognizant of that and wonder where our responsibility is. Governance is not a game. And if you treat it like a game, if you treat it like a sport, break up into teams, it's just not going to work. My concern is that who's put at risk? And of course, it's those who are the most vulnerable. Those who depend on government to ensure their safety when other people are not going to be responsible for ensuring that safety. Did we do a survey of bus riders? Did we do a survey of business leaders? Did we do a survey of the public to inform our decision? No, we didn't. I want masks gone, just like everyone. I want to move on, just like everyone. But I also feel the weight of responsibility. I understand that the decision that looks like is going to be made today will inevitably result in people being infected with COVID-19. That's indisputable. Of course it will. That's science. But the political scales here are weighing in one direction. And you know what? That's fine. That's democracy. I know where my vote will be. And that's because, again, I had a fairly split reaction from my ward. It did weigh a little bit more toward retaining masks, but it was fairly split. And at that point, I have to ask myself, what is the popular thing to do, which probably just get rid of masks immediately, versus what is the responsible thing to do? Now, some people really do have struggles wearing masks, and that's a fact, and you have to have compassion for that. But we often have to weigh the greater good. Now, I know my words aren't going to convince anyone one way or the other. That's not the intent. It's just that I think some things sometimes need to be said. So I appreciate this council. I appreciate our process, and thank you, and I'm ready to vote.
Anyone else before I go to Councillor Zadek to close? Councillor Zadek?
Thanks. It was good hearing from my colleagues as always. I'll state outright, this is a very complex issue. And I also think that everyone, it just goes without saying, everyone on this council has the best interests of Edmontonians in mind. To me, that's absolutely clear and has never been questioned. So I really appreciate the debate. I won't go over some of the points as to why I think you all should support third reading, other than just to say that this would be in effect in 6 days from now. We're going to keep the masks on transit per the province's orders. And I think it's time. This council has adapted to COVID-19. We've started meeting remotely before we're required to. We brought in the mask bylaw before senior orders of government requested it. We've done a lot to navigate from our little working groups that we had set up to with the initial suspension of our regular committee system to bringing back on public hearings, to bringing back on to continuing with council meetings and regular committee meetings. We've done a lot. We're now at a point where there's a lot of science on this issue. Jurisdictions around the world have been dealing with this now for a year and a half. Vaccines work. We have a lot more data now than we've had in the past. And so I'm going to defer on these health issues to the recommendations that we received, which is to pass third reading now. So I hope everyone can support it. But again, I just want to state, I understand where people are coming from. And it was a healthy conversation to have again today. That's all.
Thank you. Please vote on third reading.
Yes, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Councillor Katarina.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Banga. We have all the votes, Mr. Chair.
Display the vote, please. That's carried 7-6. All right, that's all we were here to do today. So this special meeting is adjourned.